Hello, my name is Mandolin Royal, and today I have a lot of moving parts on my to-do list, and it's going to start with these 3-week-old chicks from Chase. They're not quite 3 weeks old, that'll be on Sunday, but it is time for them to have everything doubled. Double the space, double the feeders, and that's going to coincide with how much more they've been eating. They're averaging almost 2 pounds per day for 28 baby chicks. And so I'm going to move them out into the barn brooders now that they can generate their own body heat. It's in a corner of the barn where it's not quite so drafty, so they'll be alright. It's not too warm outside, but these birds are going to be equipped to handle that. So once I have them moved out of there and that all cleaned out, next is time to go over to mine. They need their wing bands for their 7-day birthday, which is today. So they're going to have their first weigh-in. Everyone's going to get a wing band. And the 28 chicks I pull that have similar weights to the 7-day weights from the recreational homestead chicks, the trial chicks are going to go in this brooder. The remainder will go back in here. And it'll be another 2 weeks before these guys move out into the bigger barn brooders. So that's kind of the rotation that I'm going to be observing, but it's definitely time to get this show on the road. So more on this here in a second. These are the barn brooders that I'm going to outfit for the recreational homestead chicks. Now in these brooders out here, it doesn't really matter how dusty it is. And I'm a big fan of using peat moss as bedding. And that's because of the absorbency and the odor reduction that it has, as well as the softer texture. Pine shavings, I use them briefly and only in my hatch room because they are the lower dust option. I don't want that room getting too terribly dusty. And that's all I use pine shavings for. Everything else in this barn is peat moss. So they are still going to have a heat lamp. The heat lamps that I use are 50-watt reptile bulbs. I don't think those 250-watt bulbs are necessary for poultry, depending on your space and how many chicks you need to cover. 9 times out of 10, that's halfway to getting them cooked too soon. So to save on a little bit of electric and to create a tighter warm spot, I just use 50-watt reptile bulbs. The heat plates, they don't help me very much because I can't tell from far away if they're working or not. They're not great for shipped chicks. And while they're safer, they're not always the right option. So I'm still very much a bulb person when it comes to brooding chicks. I do have anything putting out heat double secured and tied in there pretty well. But the first step is to get these empty, sanitized, and cleaned out for a brand new batch. And then I'm going to split them 50-50 into these much bigger brooders. They're starting to get to that age where they're jumping around and playing. So I'm going to give them more room. And that's going to accommodate a bigger drinker and a bigger feeder. Because with the growth spurt that they're doing, they're going to need that over the next several weeks. From here, their space will double again in a couple of weeks. Not overcrowding them is going to be really, really important. And that's for all poultry. Don't ever crowd your birds. As you brood, keep upsizing that space. And I'm going to break down what that square footage looks like here in a couple of minutes after I get some more work done. My process for doing the chicks from the home front is I'm going to pull them from this brooder over to my weigh and tag station that I set up. If they're going to be part of the trial, I'm going to move them to the brooder behind me once I have it emptied. And if they are not going to be part of the trial, I'm going to drop them in this tote, and that will get that brooder empty so I can muck it out and put them back into fresh new digs. So I grab my week 1 weight sheet. So as I go through these guys, I'm going to be looking for comparable weights to find kind of like their friend bird in the other batch. so that they're on a level playing field over the duration of growth. And I want them to have a similar week 1 weight. So here in a second, we'll see what I come up with. I don't have a good way to do an overhead view, and that's going to get real tedious and boring. So I'm going to get back to it. Speaking of space, once all of these chicks are feathered in and they can retain their own body heat, they're going to come out of those brooders, and each batch is going into its own 9x13 coop. Since there's 28 chicks, that's going to give me a little over 4 square foot per bird, right about 7 weeks old or so. Attached on both buildings is an outdoor run, so during the day they can go out and forage and do their little chicken thing. But back to banding chicks. The barn brooders are nicely set up now with our sanitized situation, cleaned out drinker. 2 pounds of feed are going in each trough style feeder. And here's the peat moss. You can see how fluffy and loose it is, and that lasts longer than any other bedding I've used. Plus, our garden, since our soil is clay based, our garden really appreciates this stuff too. So we use it as a soil amendment after we chuck it on the compost to age for about 6 months or so for little bitty chick poops. But now it's time to go grab some birds. Oh, this concrete block helps keep that drinker a lot cleaner than if I was setting it directly into the bedding. But 14 chicks are going to go into each section. Each section is 2 foot by 6 foot. So that's going to be 0.8 of a square foot per chick for the next couple of weeks. It works well with my flock. I'd used these all last season after we got them built, and I liked them a lot, especially with the slide out trays for cleaning. And the chicks can stay in there when I slide these out. I just might have to go in there and do some scraping for some follow-up cleaning before I reinsert those trays. That peat moss, it's in there only about 1 inch thick. You don't need a whole heck of a lot. But moving on. The recreational homestead chicks are all caught. And while I was catching them, I was kind of, getting a feel. And I was looking at their leg color, and as that started to change. And as I went through, I've got 2 chicks in my pocket. We're going to do a little special on just those 2 after I get these guys situated, because I like what I see so far. So more on that in a second. These are the 2 I pulled from the recreational homestead for having the darkest foot color so far. And that's one thing you do want to pay attention to, is how early they turn and how dark they turn. I'm pretty sure this is a boy and a girl, based on appearances now, unless this one develops later on. But see how big this crop is? Both of them are over-filled to the brim, and that's why I don't like to weigh when they're that full, because I'm going to get part of that measurement as feed. So these are band number BR4 and Y6. And I'm saying that kind of for my own notes. See how I'm moving my hand down low? And this chick has not left. He's wanting to be nervous and he's totally unsure. But as long as I am non-threatening, he's going to be okay with this. Their weigh day is not till Sunday, so he's being a little premature by getting on this scale. But when I put my hands on them, my goodness, that feels great. So far they're coloring in correctly, and the fleshing feels absolutely fantastic, and that's the fullness down the keel. It's too soon to see much about anything else. But these 2 might be a couple of standout favorites, so I'll spend this little extra time with them. They're cute. And you don't know what's going on either. Look at that crop. All right. Back to work. All right, now the real tedious part is getting mine banded, weighed, taking my notes, and then getting them organized. I've been dreading that all day. But it's got to be done. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do it. I have the other brooder sanitized, cleaned out, and refilled for my part of the trial chicks. I've got my setup here. And the others are already getting settled. I heard a couple of boys in there. Did you hear that little boop-a-doo sound? Boys make that noise. What are you guys doing? Just hanging out? I don't hear any distress calls. They're pretty well spread out and getting adjusted to their new brooder situation for the next couple of weeks. All right, before I get distracted, let me go get these bands done. And I'm not going to be able to film that, so I'll just show you the data sheet after I get that filled in. One more tidbit before I get to my actual goal for today of banding and weighing my batch of the feed trial chicks. So these guys that I put in this brooder with that 50-watt reptile bulb, our overnight load tonight is going to be 36 degrees. And I am confident these guys are going to be just fine. On Tuesday night, we're going to see a low of 28. And when you think of overnight lows, because I'm a plant person and I've worked in the plant industry for a while, your overnight lows are going to be a couple of hours. When you check your dailies and you look at that hourly drop and then that increase of temperature, it's not for very long before it creeps back up towards the daily high. And our barn is wide open. That's just a little security door there. And we have airflow for days. We haven't resided the back side over there, and that's where we get a lot of breeze as well. But it's been working for me, so I'm confident it's going to work for these too. Now, another little tidbit is when you work with a single comb variety of birds, the more heat they get, the bigger that comb is going to get. So by controlling their environment, I can have some influence over how big their combs are going to get, and a little too cool will keep them smaller than a little too warm. And like I mentioned earlier, those big 250-watt bulbs, you're going to get some massive combs if you're brooding that way, especially if they have to go out into summertime heat. When these guys hit pasture, it's not going to be summertime. So we'll see how the combs turn out on these, but I'm willing to bet they're not going to be oversized. So one of the reasons I reached out to the recreational homestead to see if they wanted to have some chicks on this trial was because I heard through the grapevine that their growth rate was really similar to ours in terms of literally running neck and neck. And so far, I'm seeing proof of that, because as I go through my chicks at 7 days old and I write down their weight here in ounces, I refer to my sheet of the 7-day-old weights from the recreational homestead, and as I find that exact weight again, I put a check mark, and that is the chick that I then put over here. So far, these guys that I have in for the trial are mirroring the weights we got from recreational homestead. Exactly. 2 5/8, 2 1/2. The oddball out so far is this chick that was 3 ounces. And so that chick I put in the tote because it's going to go back into the non-trial brooder, which will be the one that they're coming out of. So I feel like so far I have a pretty good system for getting a view of the chicks and how they grow on this special Kraut Creek formulated American Bresse starter feed. I'm going to have more information on that as we go through the trial, but I'm a little actually surprised. Mine are right there with them. That's neat. Alright, moving on. Alright, so here's my 28 for the feed trial we're doing with the Kraut Creek special formulation for the American Bresse. I did have to substitute like 4 or 5 chicks for close enough weight, but everybody else an exact match to what we got from Recreational Homestead. So at this point, apples to apples for day 7. These are the chicks that are extra. I went ahead and banded and weighed them too, because why not? They can be extras. Tomorrow, because I'm out of steam for today, I'll do the hybrid chicks down below, and they'll just be on day 8 instead of day 7. And I'll make a note of that in the spreadsheet. Everyone is looking good. And they've already eaten that feeder down a little bit since I've put them in there. They're coming into the hungry age now. So finding what the actual feed conversion is, that acronym is FCR, if you ever see it mentioned online. And what we're finding here is how many pounds of feed does it take to put on 1 pound of market weight. So we're going to be running this trial on through 16 weeks and up into point of lay for the pullets. So feel free to like and subscribe if you want to follow along. Tomorrow I'll have the grams and ounces into the spreadsheet for these guys. I'm not going to do that tonight. And then I'll add in the hybrid data too. And the hybrid that I'm working with is Chanticleer with American Bresse. Just for comparison's sake. For science. So more on this later.